Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, Sejohn Sarawik, who has a very pressing question for me. But
How do
first,
I become the Ghost Rider? Oh wait, we're waiting. Okay.
well,
go
I
first.
need to make an apology. It's more of an explanation than an apology, but it's still owed to the listener. Last week, I almost called Sejohn the Champion instead of host companion. And I said that I think that's French for onion. Now, I'm somebody who grew up with Charlotte Diamond, 24 karat gold. So I know that the champignon is mushrooms. I've sung I Am a Pizza many, many times, both in English and in French. But, and Sejohn, I don't think I told you about this. I was being courted by a French-speaking trivia team. They wanted me as a member of their squad. And I very much did not want to be a member on a French-speaking trivia team squad. I might be a petit prince, but I don't want to be their petit prince. So I pointed them towards our show, and in the first, minute of recording, decided to just fuck up the French language, knowing that they would be so offended that they would just cast me aside. And it's true, they have all but been wiped from my social media. So I apologize to anybody who was offended by my lack of French knowledge, who wasn't part of that trivia team courting me to join them. And now on to this week's Say Report.
No idea what you're talking about. It's like you're speaking a whole other language.
That's
so
very funny. Right? It's all Greek to Sejohn. Wait, you're not Greek, are you?
No.
No, I'm just being a jerk. Not to the Greek people. I'm being a jerk about Sejohn's ethnicity because I'm aware of it, right? You're some kind of Spanish,
if I was
right?
Greek. It's just not. Oh my god.
No, it's just not what you are. That's all we're talking about. I just wanted to say some kind of Spanish because of that episode of Family Guy where he's writing fan fiction about Harry Potter and has Betty White reading it. And Betty White was totally on board for that, and that's why Betty White will live forever. Knock wood. I swear to God, I apologize if something happens because I said that on the Say Report. All right, now back to the Sejohn's question. I totally cut him off, but I remembered that I had gotten a lot of comments from people saying de champignons is mushrooms, and I'm like, I know that there's a long con going on right now, and I'm sorry that you had to be a rube in it. But now on to Sejohn's question, which is my microphone. Well, I had to reset up the desk where we record the Say Report because I am competing in a retro gaming tournament, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Maybe this episode, maybe in other episodes. And I forgot to plug in the key component to Say Report, and that's the computer that we Say Report on. And then, in addition to not plugging in the computer, I never plugged back in the monitor that the computer runs on. So I was 2 for 2. But the sound system that I use to, capture our voices, that was all set up. And that, as long as it's getting power from the computer, which I had gotten power from the computer earlier on than the monitor, I thought it was working, but it won't interface with the actual computer until a monitor is there. I don't know why. It's probably something that I did in the way that I've cobbled this setup together, but 253 episodes later, I'm not complaining about the cobbled together system that we've built for the Say Report. But Sejohn couldn't hear me. I could hear him crystal clear, but he couldn't hear my microphone. And he asked me a question that I felt had to be brought to the show. And that question was, have you been sucked into the internet? Are you the Ghost Rider? Now, I don't know if you're out there and you've ever watched public television, you're probably familiar with Ghost Rider. For me, Ghost Rider is where I learned about the magic of the internet because they had a modem in like 1992.
And they must have at some point redone it, right? Like it's such a thing that it's so ripe for like the CW-esque shenanigan remake, right?
I mean, I remember hearing about, and I don't know if there's any truth to it if it ever went forward, that there was going to be a streaming adaptation of Ghost Rider. Possibly on, I think it was Netflix at the time when I heard it, but I've never really looked into it because Ghost Rider, it seems like such a product of its time. It's educational television for public broadcasting, and it's about a group of kids who are detectives. Why was everything that we were marketed as children, you should become a detective? Because I feel like there were a lot of shows where it was like junior detectives.
I mean, for a number of reasons, not least of which is that it's a very easy way to create a formula for every episode. By the way, 2019, 2 seasons on Apple TV, available right now.
On Apple?
Ghost Rider.
Oh
yeah.
my God. That makes more sense because they got like the Sesame Street stuff and everything. And Curious
produced
George.
by Sesame Workshop, actually.
Well, look at me knowing stuff. Is the original Ghost Rider available? Because I would binge all of it. I'd catch up with Jamal. He's the only one I remember.
I don't know.
But the Ghost Rider lived in his house, so that's why I remember Jamal. Because the ghost.
So okay. So what is the okay? This is when it starts to be questions, right? Like there starts to be questions for me. Was the Ghost Rider a singular being that existed? And you say in somebody's house, but like my understanding was it was the internet was available
everywhere.
Yeah, I don't like was just wherever internet was, the Ghost Rider could be, right?
So no, that's not. The internet really didn't exist, and they didn't talk about Jamal's modem until like season 2 of Ghost Rider. The whole point of Ghost Rider is a ghost, but for all intents and purposes, Ghost Rider is a ghost in the Ghostbusters Slimer like category, where Ghost Rider is not a human, but it is a formless apparition, what represents a formerly living creature.
So it's not like a specific person so much as it is just like created by what, like the murder of a human being. It is the anguish that human feels.
Like maybe they didn't know how to read when they were, and they're like, I'm going to learn how to read, and then they got crushed by a piano. I feel like people used to get killed by a lot of falling pianos in the past.
Well, the sign did say, look out for falling pianos, but they couldn't read, right?
Exactly.
That's the irony.
There's the tragic irony. So then they came back, and now their unfinished business is to learn how to read. And I don't know. And people are just afraid of the Ghost Rider. It's weird, because like only certain people can see the Ghost Rider. That's a big part of the show, is that Jamal can see it. Everybody's like, what's happening in the house? And then Jamal's like, oh, there's a ghost. And then the ghost like sees letters, like in Jamal's homework assignment, and using its ghost abilities is able to highlight letters, and that's how it communicates. So as long as there are words around, the Ghost Rider can take the letters in order to communicate.
Okay. See, I had been under the understanding of this show that it had to be something on the computer, but you're saying that it could be anything, any words, any books or anything.
Right. I mean, that's how it started. But then around the second season, they realized that Ghost Rider, if it had a computer open because of all the like background processes, it could essentially use the keyboard to type, and that solved a lot of the problems because the Ghost Rider gang, they had another name, but I'm going to call them the Ghost Rider gang. It was primarily comprised of people who could see Ghost Rider, who would then get together to solve the mysteries together.
Oh man.
And
yeah, okay. So this was apparently produced by BBC Television, and I could have told you that because apparently cases would take up to 4 episodes to solve.
Yeah, it really reminded me of the Tomorrow People in the fact that it was sort of some of the earliest serialized storytelling that I ever saw. And in fact, there are a lot of Tomorrow People stories and Ghost Rider stories that I conflagrate all the time. Like one of the shows, I have no idea which one of them, had the group participating in a arcade competition. And it was like a 4-player arcade game, and you would compete to see who would get the highest score. And the bad guys, they wore masks while they played, and on the front of the mask was a monster face, and on the back of their head was a monster face. And like randomly during the competition, they would flip around, they do a 180 and play backwards, and like that made them cool.
Man, I'm just getting like, apparently this was like a whole thing that I was just on the edge of, because like I remember Ghost Rider, obviously enough to make like a joke about it
Yeah.
and like all that. But like, I didn't realize how deep this went. Apparently, it created an entire, hey, this is the sentence that is on Wikipedia, integrated branded multimedia project that included teachers' guides, software created by Microsoft specifically, home video, games and licensed products, and outreach materials in order to reach over 1 million children a month. Holy crap.
Yeah,
And apparently there's just a whole series of Ghost Rider books as well.
it's like Mavis teaches typing, but with a cool ghost pal. There was a bunch of books. I read a bunch of books. I had the Ghost Rider Detective's Guide. Like, there was a time in my life where I guess it kind of married my love of Ghostbusters with I would then learn my love of solving mysteries that is celebrated every week with the at least no less than 7 like cop shows that I watch, like formulaic cop shows. What are those called? Detective procedurals that I watch, where there's clearly a mystery that needs to be solved, and I'm really good at solving it, but mostly because I learned how to read a detective story from a show like Ghost Rider.
You know where it may be available is apparently the whole thing is owned by Shout now, because that's just what Shout Factory does.
That's what Shout
right?
does, yeah.
And they do have a couple of different ways that you can get a hold of Shout Factory material. There's like a Shout Factory TV channel if you have like Pluto TV, as well as a Shout Factory app, usually available on like Vizio TVs and stuff like that. Roku, I think, has access to it too. So if you have any of that, you could probably get the Shout Factory app and see if it's on there.
Well, I will have to do that. But yeah, Ghost Rider, it was weird because in that second episode, like, it realized it could go and it could use a computer, and then it realized it could go online, and its ability to like locate information and become the smartest thing in the world became unparalleled, to the point that I think it actually fought against like an evil AI that like these kids in New York just stumbled upon.
Oh man, that's amazing. I love it.
The show was nuts. And the real thing was that like it taught me how to like draw up a suspect page and put all your clues there and stuff that like all these skills that I never need or use anymore. But boy, oh boy, was I on board the Ghost Rider train. I wanted a pen necklace so bad.
Devin, I've gotten to the bottom of the mystery. By gotten to the bottom of the mystery, I mean that I have found the Ghost Rider's identity in a section on the Wikipedia page called Ghost Rider's Identity.
Oh my god, because I was nervous. I wanted to ask. I wanted to see, did they ever reveal the truth about Ghost Rider? And it seems like you're about to tell me and possibly ruin.
I don't know. No, ruin nothing. Oh my god, this is about to get intense, everybody. Strap in, trigger warnings abound.
Is it Andrew Garfield? I feel like it's Andrew Garfield. Not Andrew Garfield. President Garfield. What's President Garfield's first name? Grover Cleveland Garfield.
All right.
President
Ghost
Andrew
Rider
Garfield.
Producer and writer Kermit Frazier revealed in a 2010 interview that the Ghost Rider was actually the ghost of a runaway slave from during the American Civil War. He had taught other slaves how to read and write and was killed by slave catchers and their dogs. His spirit was kept in the book that Jamal first discovered in the pilot episode. And when Jamal opens the book, he is freed.
Cool. I mean, that tracks. That makes perfect sense.
Jesus, Ghost Rider got fucking serious. There's also been apparently a ton of Ghost Rider series. There was a 1997 revamp that was a Canadian show. There was a BBC radio version of the show in the mid 2000s.
That's absurd. Time out, fucking Zach Morris style. How you do a show about reading and writing as a radio program?
I'm sure that they just focus more on the story aspects than on the whole like here's how to read aspects. You know, like you said, at some point it stopped being really about the whole like here, like read a book like Wishbone style, and it was really just more about just like the mysteries.
I mean, it was never really about read a book. It was more about understanding the world around you with the help, apparently, of a Civil War era escaped slave's ghost.
Yeah. Oh man. Man, now we got to do that Netflix gritty remake, right? Like we gotta.
Apparently, they've done it on Apple. I don't know.
I don't know if they get as gritty as I'm.
They don't get as gritty as you want to get with it. You just want the ghost to spit in a spittoon.
I mean, basically, Ghost Rider is Candyman. like that is essentially what I'm just.
Holy frick! Ghost Rider is Candyman. Thank you for ruining Ghost Rider by creating a way and for it to be the thing that I fear the most in this world. I mean, as a kid, those stories, the like say it in the mirror X amount of times stories, they bothered me, but I think they bothered me for the reason that they would still bother me now, and that is, it is a display of woeful, like, lack of intelligence. Like, you're stupid. You hear a story about, oh, don't look in a mirror and say Candyman's name 5 times, and is like, let's do it just for fun, and then you're dead. It's like, we told you exactly how not to die to Candyman, and you're like, huh, that sounds like fun. Let's try it.
You know, curiosity killed the cat. That is a tale as old as time.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense in terms of, like, sometimes just heed the warning. Mm-hmm. Warnings are not challenges, is, I guess, the message of Candyman. But then, like, other things like Bloody Mary, I'm like, oh, so we're not saying Candyman, but we're saying Bloody Mary. And we don't know what Bloody Mary's going to do if Bloody Mary shows up.
Well, and the weird part about a lot of that sort of stuff was also, like that I never quite understood, like, origin wise, because it was true, like, folklore, like, passed down from generation to generation type stuff, but it was always kids that were always passing it around, so that is getting, like, doubly messed up. So, like, Bloody Mary, which was a thing that I learned about from somebody in, like, 2nd grade, was supposedly about a girl that went to our school and died, right? And then, like, you know, I hear everybody else talking about it, and it never occurs to me, like, how do they all know about this girl at my school that died? And also, how come, like, there's, like, books and stories about it from 40 years ago, about this girl that just died last year at my school?
Yeah, I mean, folklore is crazy. I'm a big fan. I've done a lot with folklore. I feel like I had this conversation the last time we did an episode, after we did an episode heavily focused on Disney Plus. But it's true. I'm a big fan of folklore, and that type of stuff, the urban legend folklore, specifically in terms of, like, the Bloody Mary stuff, very big fan of that stuff as well.
Oh, man. I'm just trying to,
and we live with Mercy Brown in Rhode Island, right? That was another one, like, she's a vampire. And I'm just like, was she a vampire? Because that'd be cool, but I doubt she was.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the weird stuff about, like, like Lizzie Borden style stuff, and people conflate that with the Bloody Mary thing. And it's like, if you go look at a mirror and say Lizzie Borden's name, you'll get hit with an axe. And it's just like, nope, you're mixing this one up. You screwed it up.
Also,
you've overcomplicated it.
Guess what I'm not gonna do? Say Lizzie Borden's name into a mirror. I don't want to get hit with an axe.
Yeah, what? Either you're wrong and this is no fun, or you're right and I get hit with an axe. What is the point here?
Yeah,
there's no win. There's no win state.
This is a reverse catch-22, where I'm not damned either way. I win no matter what. No, I guess you don't win with an axe in the chest. I don't know. They were weird. Folklores are weird, especially urban legend stuff. Like the RV, the guy who thought cruise control meant the RV could drive itself. This is making me very much want to watch the urban legend episode of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show. If nice. I didn't already want to watch Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show, I'm always at the sort of a resting state where I want to watch that show. The passing of Peter Scolari, which R.I.P. my favorite bosom buddy, and like talking about urban legend, that show was awesome. I should just bite the bullet and buy it on Amazon.
It was really good. I mean, it was one of those rare made-for-TV live-action shows of the Disney era. Like, whenever Disney did the whole cartoon thing, I actually just had this conversation the other day with the family because we were watching Hercules, the animated series. There was always this weird conceit of, like, this doesn't really fit into your favorite show, but it's your favorite characters, so shut up and watch. So, because, like, the Hercules stuff makes no sense. Literally, the episode we were watching was about one of the Titans coming back, and Zeus and Herc having to team up to take on a Titan. And I was like, how is this never then brought up 10 years later, I'm assuming, in terms of the timeline, when Herc has to go up against the Titans again, then that's the whole story. He's like, how has it been like, oh no, it's happening again?
Is it the Wind Titan?
Typhon.
Typhon, yeah.
So
So it's the
yeah,
wind
yeah.
typhon. Yeah.
But it's him and his wife and their kid, and the wife and the kid are like go stomping around, wrecking things. That's the other thing, is there's apparently also just Titans just out and about still. So like Zeus, he did a bad job. But like she's running
No,
around and she's like, "Where's my husband?" And then she releases her husband, and then they fight the husband, and then I'm just at the end of the episode, I'm just like, this was a fever dream. But then that Disney also had the live action side of that, where they would also do that, and those never worked. And the problem there was that they could never get the right actors and all that sort of stuff. And so Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is one of those rare ones where you have to just admit that that's just not the same family that's involved in the movies, and even the movies can't seem to be remain consistent with themselves.
I will say the first two movies are perfect. Honey, I Shrunk the Kid and Honey, I Blew Up the Kid, like, very impressive. The fact that they got the same Nick and Amy for those shows, and then Adam, and then even like Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves feels like it exists in the same universe. The big difference in all of those is that the mom changes, I believe, in all three films, but very much it is the same family, and they make it work. Like, if
but
Bug Hall...
Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves, though, feels like it is completely out of sync with the other ones, because like there's an entire. It feels like the kids should be grown up by now. You know what I mean?
But the kids are grown up. The one who isn't grown up is Adam, who is 2 years old in Honey, We Blew Up the Kid. So he would be at that age based upon the timeline of one Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves released.
Yeah.
They did their homework in the movie releases. That said, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series, is obviously a different family.
It's bananas.
But the best thing about it is that, like, they looked at that and they're like, okay, we want to make a show based on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but how do we do that? How do we make a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV show? We can't just shrunk the kids every week. Well, he's an inventor. So every week the monster of the week is going to be a new invention gone wrong.
Yeah, I feel like that is the track. Is more like we want to do a sci-fi show about a goofy scientist and the wacky adventures his family gets into. And then somebody in the room went, "Oh, we should tie this to Honey, I Shrunk the Kids." Probably just because Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves was coming out or did come out recently. But like no other reason than that. It's not like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is like the franchise. Like it's not like one of the.
I'm fairly certain that the success of the TV show is what inspired them to do Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves. I'm trying to think timeline-wise, because I think Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series, I believe runs 95 through 97 for 3 seasons, and then 98 is when Honey, We Shrunk Ourselves releases. Yeah. I might be off on that timeline, but like if I am, it's like +1, -1 year on either side. And because also they did a really good job taking elements that had been introduced in the series and then weirdly incorporating them into the newest movie. Like his brother is the fact that then Stuart Patinkin comes in to play his brother. I love Stuart Patinkin, by the way. Like, what happened to that guy? He comes in to play his brother, and his brother is very much a offshoot rebuilding of his brother in the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV series. God, I love that show.
But these are just like, it's so weird to me that these franchises like this and Ghost Rider can be clearly like beloved enough and marketable enough that they get these bubbled up like moments where they become important again, right? Like either a movie releases or a book series comes out or a radio show gets created, like, and everybody's just like, oh man, yeah, Ghost Rider, yeah, let's do that again. Okay, Apple TV picks it up for 2 years. Like that's just, it's weird. It's weird to me that kind of that stuff that lives on the edge that people just always kind of have a love for, and then we don't really. we don't really get too upset when it gets messed with, because it's not like something that's so near and dear to our heart that we're just like, oh no, the sanctity of the lore of Ghost Rider cannot be ruined. Like you don't hear that kind of conversation like you do with some other stuff that we have this exact same conversation about with, say, oh, I don't know, a Ghostbusters.
Yeah, exactly. And here is where, if CJ and I had gone and seen it, we would seamlessly transition into a discussion about Ghostbusters Afterlife.
I honestly forgot it came out this weekend.
Well, nobody could blame you for that, Sejohn. It has had more release dates than any other movie affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Like, that's just a fact of the matter. That no other movie had been... And the fact is, and I mean, I haven't seen the movie, but I will report on what I've been reading without, like, too much of that. But it really feels like, from everybody, it was manufactured to be a success. Like, they very much, like, nailed it all down to the core of what made the first Ghostbusters work, and then just did that again, but in the Midwest instead of New York. And I feel like if you're going to do all that calculating, that is why you lift and shift your release date as many times as they did. To be like, well, yeah. The first one came out here and it was a success. Oh, well, we can't do it there anymore. Do we have to not do it there anymore? Oh, yeah, we can't do it there anymore. There's this huge, like, viral pandemic going on.
Right.
And movie theaters just aren't open. All right, so we'll put it here. Perfect. That's when the sequel came out, and it was still kind of a success.
Oh yeah. And I love to hear that that's what the current meta story is on this movie, considering the amount of crap that Ghostbusters 2 has always gotten for just being a rehash of the first movie.
My favorite tweet that I've seen about it so far, and again, I've been staying away from it because I don't want it spoiled for me, but my favorite tweet I saw was, rewatched Ghostbusters 2 last night. This movie is better than Ghostbusters Afterlife. And I'm just like, oh, well, that's a statement and a claim, and I don't doubt that at all. Because if there's anything that we've learned in our continual exploration of the Ghostbusters universe, which has been like sort of low level, and then we jumped in whole hog into Ghostbusters 2016 last month, is that whenever the new one comes out, there becomes a lot of praise and nostalgia and rediscovered love for the ones that came before it. But yeah, you're not wrong. There are those things where a reboot or a reimagining come along and people aren't upset about them, but then there are the ones that, like, how dare you do another Ghostbusters movie?
Yeah, and it's interesting to me where the line is for that, because like I said, like it's not like Ghost Rider or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or anything like that. Like it's not weird to me now if somebody says they want to do something like that, like they want to go back and they want to find that thing and then like revamp it, especially in the age of like Netflix and Hulu and the streaming wars and the ways in which they need content, right? It's kind of like the 24-hour news cycle problem that we had 20 years ago, where everybody was like, I mean, it's great that you want to do this, but how are you going to fill 24 hours worth of news? And then we found out the hard way that it was going to be with a bunch of shit, right? And then the same thing is now kind of happening with all these streaming services. It's just like, it's great and all that you want to be your own streaming service like Peacock, but what are you going to do to justify being your own thing and not just being available on some other service? And what you're going to do is you're going to revamp some stuff, rehash some things, go back into the nostalgia bucket and all that sort of stuff. And like it's very, very common nowadays to see these conversations of people being like, oh, I hold that original near and dear to my heart. I hope they don't do something to it that makes me regret that, which is a weird conversation as it is. But like, this is, I guess what it is these things are just evidence that that's kind of always been in the water. We just have never really talked about it as much as we do now.
I mean, yeah, it's Son of Kong is what I point to as just evidence of we have never really given a shit about art in America. And that's King Kong comes out and is huge. Everybody loves King Kong, right? Pardon the pun of the huge of it all. That was not the intention. But it is. That movie did gangbusters.
Right.
And then 9 months later, they come out with Son of Kong. It is the shortest, like, not pre-planned, not pre-discussed, sequel to ever be made and released in America.
Yeah.
Is Son of Kong, which also, like, they didn't call it Son of Kong because, oh, it'll be a 9-month gestation period. That's just a happy fucking accident.
Oh man, yeah. It's one of those things where I guess I hear people talk about this sort of stuff like it's new, like right, like the other one that's out this weekend that's getting a lot of really weird back and forth is the new Cowboy Bebop remake, the live action one with John Cho.
Of, but I haven't had a chance.
Well, we'll talk about why I didn't actually get to dive into this thing that I've been like super excited about for a while, but I did not have a chance to get too deep into anything the last few days. But yeah, so that comes out, and a lot of people are having these same conversations of just like, oh, they're ruining my childhood, blah blah blah. They've wrecked the original, and or like this is what it's missing that oomph, it's missing this. And then there's other people that are just like, I didn't even finish the original, but now this I can get behind. So like it's got those conversations, but. And then the topic always inevitably turns to people bashing on Netflix and the live action anime movie and how adaptation. Thank you. And that becomes the conversation is about how Netflix is just doing another bad anime adaptation. Like they somehow invented that concept. Like Dragon Ball existed a few long before Netflix did, guys, and it was not great. Like we've always done those kinds of things. And the problem is that like we say that they're not well received or they're not good and all that, but actually a lot of the times those kinds of things are super well received in other markets. They don't do huge here because in America we've got some weird like thoughts and predetermined feelings about things in a way that other markets don't seem to give a shit.
I mean, we have those thoughts and feelings about certain things, but also those thoughts and feelings will be completely disregarded. It's weird that like an anime adaptation to live action is a sin. We hate that in America, but other live action adaptations we're totally there for. Like I don't know what it is. I mean, with anime specifically, it feels like a lot of the time it is because we are taking something from another culture that for some people is a way to look into Japan and learn about Japan and that whole cultural thing, and then uniquely colonizing it and making an American version of it.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. You want to talk about things like whitewashing and stuff like that. Those are definitely conversations that are worth having. The problem is the person out there that just their entire feeling is not, that's not their anchor. Their anchor is like, I remember when I was a kid and I watched this thing and it became my identity, because that's what happens when you're a kid. You adopt it and it becomes everything about you. And so anybody doing anything to it, it feels like it's like a personal attack on you. And you have to remember that like, no, that's not how this works. Like they weren't thinking about you specifically while they were making this with a big old middle finger in the air. Like that's not what happened.
I mean, it can happen though. Sometimes Spike will look at the screen and say, "Fuck your thoughts about this Devon Decker of Coventry, Rhode Island. John Cho rules!" And it's just like, would that happen? Did that really happen? Or did I fall asleep watching Cowboy Bebop? Again, I don't know if that happens. I haven't watched it yet. No, I don't know if those actually happen, but I feel like there has to be some moments where people are disappointed because, oh, that attacked the one thing that I didn't want them to attack. But again, Caesar's not wrong. If you feel that way, it's narcissism, it's egotism, it's bias based upon what's happening, because it's something that's shared by everybody. And also, those adaptations that you see, that's somebody's interpretation, probably of the same thing that you love and enjoy. Now, all of that said, if there's any truth to what I've read about the Netflix adaptation of Avatar: The Last Airbender, it should be a void like the Last Airbender adaptation.
The information that you and I have shared about that adaptation that you have found has got to be the biggest troll in the universe, because Avatar as a concept literally doesn't work in that context. It would be like me saying that I'm going to make a Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, but I'm going to make sure that vampires were wiped out 100 years ago.
I'm going to make a Buffy the Vampire Slayer right. TV show, but Buffy is a man. What?
Yeah, Buffy is a man. Vampires are extinct, and also she's a lawyer now. They're a lawyer now.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
true. It's I mean,
the stuff that you and I have talked about with the Avatar stuff and the stuff that's floating around the internet about that is, and the other reason why I think it's pure, and this is where it becomes like a real problem, is that there are so many people that are so heavily invested in Avatar: The Last Airbender as a concept that anyone touching it and doing anything with it, it becomes so easy for internet like trolls and for people out there who just, it's not even trolling at this point. They literally are just instigating just to for the sake of instigating. It's like it's not even that they're even having any fun doing it. It's like this weird thing where, like, I mean, essentially it feels like there's like an AI bot out there that has no feeling one way or the other about how we actually perceive the things it's putting out. It just is putting things out
like an
just
evil
because it
version of
can.
Ghost Rider, just to
Yeah,
keep
it's
tying
yeah.
back to that concept.
Like it's not even like I understand like I am never going to be able to get into the quote unquote mindset of a troll, right? But I at least understand that there is supposed to be some element of pleasure involved on their part to see like the shit fly, and I think that a lot of it is probably that, like with the Avatar stuff. But some of the stuff that you and I have talked about is so ridiculous that I can't even wrap that, like, my head around that being a possibility for some of it too. Is That's ridiculous.
I
I
mean,
think that's
it
yeah.
really feels like that AI designed that whole thing for no other reason than to put it out there. But then the trolls who discovered it realized how easily they could weaponize it to have that fun. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's that it's that sort of situation, because it does. I can't imagine anybody sitting there being like, "This is what I'm going to tell people the new Avatar is about, and I
I mean,
can't
you
wait to
basically
enjoy it."
you sent me an article that basically described it as like Degrassi.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, let's set Avatar in a high school. Now, the worst part about that is it whoever decided that, right? Why like AI doesn't seem completely off base as an explanation for it is whatever decided, oh, let's say it's in a high school, that's sort of Netflix's bread and butter. Netflix will take these things and be like, and let's set it in a high school. Immediately, what jumps to mind is Reboot, another show that like nobody was upset when it was announced that they were going to reboot. I did it. I pulled it off, Sejohn. That's
Nice.
$10 to me. But once Reboot was awful and did not feature Bob or Dot or Matrix, like, and it was instead basically Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle, but set in a high school environment, and they come in
Right.
and out all the time. Everybody was like, well, they messed up this time. Maybe the next reboot will be worth it. Did it twice. Um, but, sorry. So that's the thing. But it's not super off base to think, oh man, they could totally set
But it
Avatar
kind
in
of
a
is
high
though, right?
school.
Because there's two things you got to remember about that story you just told. Is first of all, that was a really early attempt by them that, as you pointed out, was so poorly received that they've buried it. Like, I'd be hard pressed to see it suggested to anyone. You could probably find it if you searched for it. I'm not saying it's not available on Netflix, but you know, there's like an entire library of Netflix acquisitions and creations and stuff like that that exist out there that almost never get watched because they're just not they're suggested to such a small niche of people, and then on top of that, once they're suggested, somebody has to then choose to actually watch it. So like, think of it this way on a more personal level. There is a Netflix that you know, Devin. There is a whole other Netflix out there that you just have no concept of because like you don't even think to look for these things, nor would you care to if you did. Like it's just it's so wild how deep that well really is, and as people, we only ever see like little bits and pieces of it. That's the other problem I have with all this stuff about saying like it's Netflix's bread and butter to do this, because what other adaptation did they do, and what other adaptation did they ever do that was so successful that would make you think that they would risk it on this like most expensive, in their words, most expensive adaptation they've made of ever? Like, they would not risk that much money and use a formula that has, in my opinion, been used maybe once. I honestly forgot about the reboot, but the idea being that when it was used, it fell on its face so friggin' hard. You don't then turn around and throw $100 million at that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. You don't. I'm not your enemy in this one, Sejan. But I
Yeah,
guess what
but
I'm talking
everybody's
about
just.
is
But
there.
the point is like is you're not the only person that uses this language, but the ways that people talk about, and we'll just keep using Netflix because they really are they're the big dogs in the house, and so they take all the shots, right? But the idea being that like everybody says, oh, well, Netflix always does this, but then nobody can ever actually talk about like a series of incidents in which Netflix does a thing.
Well, I mean, I was going to talk about the fact that really early on Netflix original programming, and we've already talked about what that means. Maybe it's acquisitions from other things. I feel like a lot of them may have been Canadian shows, especially when I go further and look at the people who were in them, and then their careers after those shows. It almost feels like Netflix acquired. The big one that I'm thinking of is Trinkets, which is, I guess, what I was using to prove my point of like, let's take these stories and set them in high schools, because high school is enough of an understood environment that it's a fine backdrop for almost any story. Because Trinkets is weird that it's a high school story in addition to a story of people who like go to Shoplifters Anonymous or whatever it is. Like, you could just do a story about adults who like have issues with kleptomania or something like that, right? But then you take a story like that and you slam it into the high school setting, like, people understand what's going to happen. And even like my parents were okay watching that show with that as the backdrop, because the other stuff was compelling to them. But the high school of it was sort of just like, it was forgotten so much further down the line because they realized, oh, this wasn't important in terms of how that story was being told. And it really feels like it's an easy way to set something so that it has sort of not universal appeal, but universal understanding. Because like most people understand high school.
Yeah,
as a concept.
So
I don't
Trinkets
know.
but Trinkets was a book series, right? Like, that Netflix just adapted into a show, and it was written by the same. Yeah, it was written by the same woman that wrote like 10 Things I Hate About You, like, and things like that. So like
ruined my
drama.
Ruined that for me. Thank you. I thought it was original. I didn't realize it was a book series. Don't forget me. Forget me and forget me too.
But this is exactly my point, right? Is like these conversations where we're talking about this and they talk about quote unquote Netflix does this. The other big one that people will talk about is the Netflix apparently approach of slamming people of otherness into roles that are otherwise originally weren't. And the problem I have with that conversation is not necessarily so much that they don't do that. I would use different language. I would say that Netflix introduces people of otherness into stories that are otherwise quite white.
Quite white.
But then the conversation is inevitably just like people are talking about how that ruins a character because of this or that and blah, blah, blah. And like, it's really, really rare for me to ever see any handhold in those kinds of conversations. Like the closest, and this is kind of not Netflix, so like getting away from the point a little bit, but the only time I've ever really seen an interesting conversation about that was the choice to make Roland, played by Idris Elba in the Dark Tower film, like to cast Idris Elba in that role was really interesting, especially because in those stories it is explicitly referenced that he is Caucasian in his world, whatever that means in the fantasy realm. But on top of that, it is part of his backstory that he falls in love with someone who is not his race, and it becomes a huge thing that like that is a part of why they're run out of town. There's without getting into too many nitty-gritty details about it, like Stephen King created that character with a certain like type in mind. Now, that being said, that is such deep lore knowledge that do I think that matters for when they do a film adaptation? Not necessarily. Not really, especially because that film was already going off the rails as kind of not being in that realm in many other ways. So like, and so that conversation is interesting, but the problem is people want to use that as like a reason against all types of like colorblind or gender blind casting and things like that. And it's just like, you can't do that. Like, you can't use one example that only kind of works and then talk about the world writ large as if it should all be based on that one rule. And that seems to be what everybody does when it comes to this adaptation stuff. And until you get to things that people don't care about, and that's the other killer. is that like every now and then, so this happens with stuff that nobody really knew about or cared about. So like it's not brought up, it's not questioned in any way. So like you only so it only really matters when it affects you personally, and it becomes really obvious really quick how selfish of a conversation that becomes.
I get that.
It's a really weird attitude that we seem to have developed, and I think it really is highlighted by like we've talked about this before, the like the I deserve this attitude of audiences nowadays, and particular types of audiences that are just like this is for me, so you should do it the way I want you to do it, and that's really gross.
Yeah, good point. Sorry, I'm trying to think. That's such a weird thing about adaptation, and everything that you're saying, and like the colorblind, like that should be what you aspire to when you're adapting something, is to make it your own. Now, I'm not saying that in making it your own, change everything about it, but
Yeah.
you should be open as somebody who's going to consume an adaptation. I mean, by the very nature of the word, like things are going to be changed, right? Like, it can't be the same. We can't go to a Harry Potter movie that covers everything that happened in the book, because then it would be 5 hours long, and the middle would suck. Right? I mean, being honest, I don't...
Yeah, no, I agree. Like the idea being that it was one of the big things about the Harry Potter movies as they were coming out, is they were like, oh, I wish they did this and they forgot that and they didn't really touch on this. And you're right. Like, well, that movie would be 6 hours long, or worse when you get into the later ones, to the point where we then saw them try and break one of the books into two, and they still caught a lot of flack for things that were not there. So it's just, and it becomes, then we start talking about things like The Hobbit, right? Where the Hobbit gets broken up into three movies, and everybody talks about how Peter Jackson needs an editor. So it's just like there's no winning. And part of this conversation is also I have to remind myself that the internet is not really truly a monolith. We talk about it like it is. We talk about like criticism and reception of films and books and things like that, like they are, like it's one person represented by all people, represented by one person. Like there's this terrible circle we get on where we start talking about one thing one person said and act as if everybody in the world thinks that way. And I know that that's not true. It's just that the problem is we now live in these echo chambers, and we now live in these bubbles that we've created for ourselves, where this is all we hear, and we don't ever get to break out of that stuff. We never get to experience anything new. We never get to have a differing opinion anymore, or have fun conversation about the idea that like, oh, I liked this movie, I know you didn't, but like there's at least this one part we can agree it was either like awesome or terrible, like let's talk about that. Like you never get that. It just doesn't happen anymore.
Right. I mean, and that's why, thank God for this show, because I mean, I've told the story of after I saw was it Ghost in the Shell? I think it was. No, it was Kong Skull Island, right? Keeping with the King Kong theme. We're really good at themes this week. And then I had told somebody that I saw Kong Skull Island, and, I would have liked to have a discussion about it instead of that movie was fucking awful. And I'm like, oh, so I'm not going to have fun at this gathering of film people, right? Like, yeah. That movie was fucking awful. You're not inviting me to have a discussion with you, right? And there's all these people here. I'll find somebody else who might be more open-minded about film, as opposed to I'm here to wave my opinion around and nobody else's opinion matters.
Oh, man.
And then I found, and that's the same night where somebody was talking about Silence by Martin Scorsese, and I said, oh, I really liked that movie, and they're like, why? What was there to like about it? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I have a lot of experience with theology and the theological concepts that were explored in it. Oh, so I have to have read the Bible?
Was pretty good in that
yeah,
one.
President Garfield was good in that one. I'm like, oh, so I have to have read the Bible to better understand the film? I'm like, no, actually, that's what I liked about it, is how they told story without you having to know it. And then, it just evolved into, well, it was fucking awful. And I'm like, so I'm going to go. This is not a gathering for me. And it is disappointing. Here's the thing I think about in the shower a lot, right? Here's a shower thought from Devin Decker. And that is the fact that we are so... as a generation, right? I'd say it's a generational thing. I'd say it's a millennial thing. We are so programmed, designed to give our opinion on things that we have like engaged with and entertained ourselves with. And I feel like that comes from basically in school, all we did was fucking book reports.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything that we did, and not just in English class, where like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really see the value of the book report at all as somebody who did so many of them. Like, what is this? Read a book and then do a 5-paragraph essay on that book and try to answer these questions to this criteria. Like, I guess it shows how to create that thing, but what am I really learning about the book, right? I'm just trying to answer your criteria. I'm not engaging with that book in any sort of real level. But then also, like, history, you're going to read this chapter of history, and then you need to sum it up. Science. I mean, science is a different thing, but still, every sort of, like, lab that I ever did was sort of a book report about the lab. Like, the entire generation, the entire millennial generation, and I say that as a millennial, right? I am not throwing shade or anything like that, was taught and conditioned in order to do something and then review that something, which is why, right, something like YouTube comes along, and the original conceit of YouTube was to be a place to watch every music video ever made, right? That was the original mission statement of YouTube, is we wanted the place where we could put up music videos because music videos weren't being shown on MTV anymore. So we came up with YouTube.
Nice.
And then YouTube, right? All these people who really the only marketable skill they have is to experience something and then talk about it. They flock to YouTube, and that's where review culture comes from. And it comes specifically from our public education system, like genetically engineering us to only be able to do that.
Yeah, and the other thing about like the YouTube review culture is that YouTube more and more and more really started restricting a lot of other more creative endeavors and projects. It's really hard to do anything really creative on YouTube nowadays because you're not going to get monetized. You're not going to get into the algorithm. You're not going to get suggested to people unless you're following the rules really strictly. And a lot of that, it's not that you can't be creative, but it's so much easier to just become just a reviewer of things now. You just, review something and don't swear.
Yep.
And you'll at least make some money on YouTube. Maybe not gangbusters, but you'll make something, right? And that is fed by this thing that you're talking about, where a bunch of people flocked to YouTube because it was a place where they could just sit there and talk about things. But like infamously now, you have these guys that will do 8-hour long like rip aparts of the latest episode of Doctor Who and things like that. Like they'll go out there and they'll do something that's twice the movie over. Like we've always made it a joke on this show that whenever we talk about a movie, we want to go at least as long as the movie went. But that's just because of you and I wanting to have that much conversation about this thing. And that is never, and I hope that we never get to a point in those things where what we're doing is like telling people how to feel about those things. You know what I mean? Like I never want to, and there's a difference between the good reviewers and the bad reviewers on YouTube, because you can tell the ones out there that are exploring the ideas in a thing, reviewing it itself, and yes, giving their opinion on it, but like they should be letting you know every step of the way why they have that opinion and why your opinion might be different than theirs, like addressing things like other opinions in their work and stuff. But that is not the case with some of these guys out there. I mean, you hear about some of the more toxic ones where again it becomes like 6-hour-long videos talking about why Pokimane is the worst Twitch star, and like there's nothing in it except just a bunch of horrendous misogynistic language, and like there's no effort to talk about like the strides that somebody like a Pokimane has made in like basically defining that character, is defining that character for profit, and like basically like designing how you do that on Twitch for people. It's wild to me that we have hit a point in this review culture where we've kind of lost the thread on that. Like reviews are supposed to be like conversations and not lectures. And that's, I think, maybe the book report thing that you're talking about, is that we were just kind of taught that that's how you quote unquote review a thing, is that you actually just like lecture about it. You just report on it. You don't put any effort into talking about the whys, the hows, the other possible thoughts out there in the world about it. You don't do that in book reports.
Right. And I mean, if I've told the story on the show before, I've told the story on the show before, and I'm sorry about it. But it was a formative moment in my life in terms of how I interacted with media. And it was my senior year of high school, and we were reading Brave New World. And the teacher was so obsessed with the fact that Lenina has purple eyes when we're first introduced to her. I don't know if you've ever read Brave New World or anything like that.
Yeah.
Of the dystopian utopia stories, right? And that one's even just sort of utopia. It's sort of the one that I connected with, and I think this story is the big thing about it. And she asks, like, straight out, what do you think the author is trying to say when he gives Lenina purple eyes? And I raised my hand and said that she has blue eyes, but she's under red lights, because he earlier said that the room is bathed in red light because any other light would kill the fetuses that she's growing in that room. So when we look at her, our eyes flashed purple is because of the reflection of red light off of her blue eyes. And she asked me to leave the room. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I left the room. I had to go to the principal's office, and they're like, what'd you do, Devon? And I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I thought I was having a discussion about Brave New World, and I was told to go to the principal's office. And then later, right, she spoke with me, the teacher, and she's like, so what you touched on, that's a really interesting point you made. And I go, yeah, it's not an interesting point, is what Huxley was doing with that part of the story. Because I had read the book before, and I know that there are moments where it talks about her blue eyes, making Bernard feel like a man for the first time, as he saw such happiness dance across them. And I'm like, I thought that's what you wanted to do. And she's like, that's not really where my lesson plan was going. So, like, you saying that would have derailed it. And that's why I just removed you from the situation. And it's like, oh, well, that's not cool at all. And when that's a teacher.
Also not the way you plan
when
to
that's
teach.
The person, like, it just felt very. I mean, that teacher, right? The teacher she was my English teacher, and she also taught me literature and film that year. And both of those classes, a lot of the times, like, that would become a thing. Like, she would just say Brave New World to me, and it would be, don't participate in this conversation because you're on a different level than the rest of the class on this. And so I just have to sit there bored, right? And I've talked before about how my senior year was already that, because I had completed everything I needed to graduate except for the 12 years in school clause for some reason. Education in this country is fucked up, right? And I'm going to use this right now as an opportunity to talk about it, and I've already been doing it for a while. But just as that, but then afterwards, like, she gifted me the latest edition of the book we used in film. She's like, because I think you're going to need it for the analysis that you're actually doing. I'm sorry I gave your final report in English a D, but, like, that's not really what the assignment was. You went above and beyond the assignment while also kind of, like, spitting in the face of it. But I wanted to know, it's one of the best literary analysis I've ever read. You just didn't do the assignment. And I'm like, well, we were supposed to analyze the book, and if I just did the best literary analysis you've ever read, how am I supposed to win when the rules keep changing?
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, part of.
Sorry, I feel weird having these discussions with you. First of all, I mean, I really love that we're living up to the show about everything moniker of the Say Report this week. But also, I know how much education you've done and what it is. I just want you to know that I'm not looking at you as some sort of scion of education for answers. I'm just kind of registering some complaints to the universe.
No, I mean, like, it comes down to the idea that book reports and even like just simple lab reports and simple just breakdown of like reporting as opposed to, reviewing or actually like writing a true essay, which should mean that you introduce like opposing like things. And it's very easy to have kids just report on what they did so that you can verify that they did it. And that's really where a lot of this comes from. Like the idea that we have just all been taught how to do this. Well, it's because the education system was so bad, and all they ever wanted to do was just verify that the work had been done. They didn't care whether the work stuck. They didn't care whether the work did anything important. They just needed to know this was the beat you were supposed to hit. Did you hit it? Good. Moving on is just like all that education has been for the last 30, 40 years, really. And it's not it's not healthy. It's not good. I mean, it's something that we talked a lot about when you talk about becoming a teacher. Like you hear a lot of people talk about the ways in which you need to break those kinds of cycles and how to be a good teacher and stuff like that. And that's all fine and dandy until you then put a 20-something-year-old kid in a room as a teacher of 35 kids, and the school system says teach them this or you lose your job in 6 months. Like, guess what they're going to resort to in order to make sure that everything gets, that the bills get paid and the roof stays over their head. Like, there's just, the system is just broken from the top down, and there's not really too much you can do except try not to become the worst cog in the system is essentially like the only thing going right now, especially 2 years into a pandemic when like everything's gone tits up. I mean, like now you're doing this plus your students aren't even in the same room as you. Like it's a nightmare scenario really when it comes to teaching. And I applaud anybody that can put up with it long enough to make a career out of it.
Yeah, it's and I guess that's the other thing. It's like I understand that is overwhelming and you can't cater to every student, but like that, what type of if I weren't Devin Decker, right? What type of message was you need to leave the room because you're discussing something that I don't want to discuss today? What message does that teach me?
It breeds the lazy student, the one that can get away, the one that ends up getting through high school because they just did the reading and they could take the tests and make the answers, but at the end of the day they feel like they didn't become a human being in all of that process. And we hear about that all the time, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely feel like going through the trials and tribulations that I did, I came out of high school feeling like an adult. Also the fact, and this is a different complaint, I loved that I worked while I was in high school. I feel like that has just gone the way of the dodo as well. Mostly because the people who are filling the jobs that used to be fulfilled, and this is another thing that we're seeing in the wake of the pandemic, because it's not the case anymore, but there was that time where like everybody kind of lost their jobs at like factories or like these big companies. So then entry-level jobs were being filled by older people who already had some sort of work ethic. So McDonald's didn't have to take a chance on the 16-year-old who's trying to, learn how to work. Right? Does that make sense? Am I completely off base with that?
Some of it is that for sure. Some of it, though, is also long before the pandemic, that sort of thing was really becoming less and less appealing because more often now students have to do extracurricular activities and they have to do a bunch of fucking homework.
Yeah.
So like the idea of then also working even 10, 20 hours a week isn't possible. Because they're gone all weekend because they're going off with the debate team to a different state or they're going to a track meet every Saturday morning. So like that job at Dunkin' Donuts just isn't going to fly because guess when they need you to work the most, like that kind of stuff. So like we were also kind of losing that steam. All the pandemic really did was just kick that into high gear. And then the idea that there were these older workers that you could depend on, but the bigger issue right now is even those jobs are starting to go away.
Oh no, I mean the pandemic stuff. The change there and what you're talking about is paramount to the point is now places like McDonald's, because I mean we have to acknowledge that we lost a huge portion of our population who like would be doing those jobs. Like that's just a fact of the matter. That's just the numbers, that there are less people. And if there are less people, there are going to be less people who are going to be willing to take those undesirable jobs because they have to survive. And that's gross, right? But again, it's just the facts and figures of the situation. So now, like, McDonald's is saying that we'll hire 15-year-olds again, right? Like, that was their marketing. And if you're 15 and you start, you'll be guaranteed this amount of money to work. And then people kind of lost their minds that, like, why are they trying to get 15-year-olds to come in and work at McDonald's? Where, like, when I was 15, like, almost everybody I knew worked at McDonald's. I was lucky to get a job at Blockbuster. And what you're talking about, that whole kids are now asked to do so much more as part of being a student in high school, so that having a job is just, you don't have time for it. Like, that's why people are upset that McDonald's is trying to appeal to 15-year-olds and calling it like trying to exploit child labor at that same time. I don't know. It's I guess it's just that, like, education is breeding students and not contributing members of society is sort of what it looks like from where I'm sitting.
I mean, it's not even, it's even beyond that. It's just that the entire idea of growing a human, and not just education, like stepping away from just the idea of like an institution, like a school that's supposed to do it, just like as a people growing a student, growing a kid up. Like, it's supposed to be something that we all take part in, right? Like, it takes a community,
it takes a village.
Right. And there's this idea that what we've done is we've fast-tracked so much of what a human needs to know in order to get by in this world, and part of that is on us, like, as the ones that were trying to do the right thing, because we wanted everybody to have access to that information, to an education and stuff like that, access to the internet and the ability to do these things. But then we never really took the time to like shape that in any way. Like, the internet for such a long time was the Wild West, and there's no really going back from that, because so much has been allowed to happen and exist on the internet now, and we all know that once it's on the internet, it's never really gone forever, right? So, like, this idea that now we want to start putting things in place, like with YouTube. Now there's also YouTube Kids, but guess what? YouTube Kids is horrendously worse at blocking content from small children than actual YouTube is. Like, there's more complaints about issues with, like, porn slipping through and problematic content making its way through YouTube Kids than main YouTube ever gets, and that's fucking wild to me. But it's all born from this idea that we spent all this time thinking about what we should do, and nobody spent any time thinking about how to actually get it done.
Yeah, jeez, when you put it like that, it just sounds terrible. It just sounds awful.
I mean, it's part of the reason that we talked about, like, I thought we were supposed to take this time during the pandemic to figure some of this shit out, is the idea being that we finally had the universe was stepping in, science was stepping in and saying, you need to reset. We're giving you 2 years to just sit in your homes and think about what you've done and come out a better person on the other side. And we didn't take that opportunity. We didn't do fuck all with it. We all just sat around and kept waiting for things to get back to normal. Some people got so antsy they just forced things back to quote unquote normal in a way that ruins it for a lot of other people. But, like, we didn't spend any of that time actually trying to solve any of our problems, and that's such a bummer to me, because I don't know if we're ever going to get an opportunity like this again, where the whole world just kind of takes a breath. Like, you know, like, they stopped collecting, like, money for student loans and stuff like that. Like, they stopped kicking people out of homes for not being able to pay rent. There was this moment where we all just kind of got it. We all just understood, like, hey, shit's tough right now, so we're going to just cheese it with, like, some of the shittier attitudes that we've got. And we did that, but then we didn't go anywhere with it.
Yeah, we didn't come up with meaningful reform. And I think one of the worst things about it is that our election, right, an election for the president of the United States happened to fall during that 2-year, like, reset period, like that recalibration that we were given, because a lot of it in terms of that was focused on getting elected, right? Yeah, it was all that election was about how we steer things forward after the pandemic, and none of that happened, right? Like, that everything that was talked about was what we're going to do afterwards, and we really haven't seen anything in terms of, like, real political change to step forward that. I don't know. I mean, the reason that I'm in this mood, right? The reason why I want to talk about all this stuff, and maybe we can kick it into like more fun things after this little discussion. But you know, the dark underbelly, it's everything. It's part of it, and it's been weighing on me. Is I was talking with somebody who said, you know, I'm mad about my college debts, but I'm ready to pay them off. And once they start collecting again, I'm really gonna start attacking what I owe for my college degree. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I wish that I don't even know. Like, I don't, like, what made you realize that, like, I need to pay this off in not having to pay it for the last 2 years? I don't understand how that happened, because, like, me, I held myself off and I lived my life the way I did so that I could pay off my college debts. And now that all of that's done and has been done for, like, the past 3 years, like, I'm actually starting to put money together to actually do some of the things that I didn't allow myself to do because I didn't want to be under that ceiling of debt for my degree, that, like, other people don't do that. And I mean, your college degree, right? Your college loans, they are, while they're eternal, right? And they're always kind of there. They're also sort of lenient about it, right? You don't need to pay like a crazy amount. You can pay whatever you want. And in fact, they want you to pay less so that you owe money to them, more money overall, right? I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, it's just, I think what it is and the piece that you may be missing is the idea that for the system to work, you need to have money in order to make money. And
right.
If you don't have anything to start off with, then you can never really kind of get that leg up. So I'm sure that what this person was getting at was that for the first time for 2 years, they were not being,
right?
Yeah,
like,
they weren't being hounded, and they were allowed to build savings and then eventually get equity and get like good credit so that they could actually start doing things like the ridiculous nature of trying to purchase a house right now, which is what me and my family are going through. And the idea being like, you know, if you already owned a house, this would be a million times easier. And it's like, great, guys, thanks. Like, but we've actually heard people use those words with us. Like, you should have bought a house 5 years ago. And it's like, how are we supposed to do that? We can't do it now. How were we supposed to do it 5 years ago when we didn't even have real jobs? We so it's the most, it is the idea that the way that the system works in this country, at least, is that you need to already kind of be on top in order to stay on top. And it's the climb that is just made more and more impossible every day. And that's part of what I'm talking about, is like, we had this chance for the last 2 years, because it's like we all acknowledge that. Like, think about the idea that they stopped on evicting people, right? And they said, hey, we're not going to let you just evict everyone in the middle of all of this. Everybody's losing their jobs. They can't pay their rent. We're going to put a moratorium on evictions. And so it was that acknowledgement that, hey, like, sometimes just kicking people out is not the best answer when there's money issues. And we all kind of agreed, like, yeah, of course not. And then came the time where things were kind of still the same way that they were. And then the conversation became like, all right, time to start kicking people out again, right? And it's like, no, wait a minute, wait. We just talked about this. Like, this idea being like, you can't just do that. That's not, the system shouldn't work that way. There needs to be other systems in place. I mean, look at the idea of the fight about the idea that minimum wage just shouldn't be raised. But meanwhile, right now, unemployment is giving you more money than minimum wage in most states. And it's just like, okay, unemployment is based on the idea, like, literally the math is based on the idea of how much money does a human being need to live. So if you're saying that the unemployment money that has the math about how much money a human being needs to survive is paying more money than the minimum wage in your state, you should probably, like, that should be a clue, right? That should be something that sets off a conversation in your state about how you need to raise that minimum wage. But no, instead the conversation is we need to get rid of the unemployment benefits because nobody wants to work anymore. It's just like read the room, like figure it out, like, do the math, become the detective that we were all told we were supposed to be when we watched these kids shows.
I mean, the other thing about that is the federal assistance that is being given to these companies who are running with threadbare staffing numbers. I don't know if you read the article about the guy who applied for 60 entry-level jobs in Florida and only got a callback for one of them.
Yeah.
And that guy wasn't like homeless Joe. Like, that guy, he applied for stuff that, like, as entry-level work based on what he had done, he probably should have been considered by more than one of 60 jobs.
Yeah, I mean, his point was that like everybody out there says just get a job, like this could all be solved, or the idea that nobody wants to work anymore, like all of this stuff about how companies are trying, but it's the employees that are, or the possible employees that are the lazy ones. And so he set out to kind of prove what that actually looks like. And so yeah, he applied for dozens upon dozens upon dozens of jobs around him that were supposed to be entry level, that were supposed to be accepting people today in desperate need, and then only heard back from a handful of them, and then after that only got an actual offer from one of them. It's like that's ridiculous. So obviously you don't need people that bad, huh?
Right. Or because it's, I don't know. And the whole way in this country that we will support the corporation but not the person is very telling as well. Like, we're still seeing that right now. Right. And like those small business loans that people got. And then like Tom Brady is able to get $10 million of those small business loans just as Tom Brady. Like, I don't know. I don't know where I got down this line where I'm feeling this way. I guess where I'm feeling this way is that we were unable to get a turkey for Thanksgiving. We went out to the store and there were no turkeys available.
There's a ton of turkeys out here, man.
Oh, I guess I'll just come out to Utah to get our turkey for Thanksgiving.
Let me send one over. I'll pumpkin chunk it over to you guys over on the East Coast.
Yeah, it was just like going to the supermarket and going really anywhere, right? I've begun venturing out into the world again and seeing like shelves and stuff just bare because of the supply chain issues. And it's not just the supply chain issues, it's also that mentality of like, I need to stock up on this stuff because it might be the last time that you see it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it feels like we're living in a dystopian novel. It's felt that way for a while, but like, I'm really starting to see it.
Yeah.
With the things that I'm doing. I mean, and the fact of the matter is, I really would have loved to just wheel in an AV cart for this week's episode of the Say Report, because I haven't been feeling great since some news that the entire country got on Friday, and what that means for what our nation stands for anymore. So, like, I'm sorry that it's kind of doom and gloom with the Say Report this week. And not the fun doom like Doom Patrol, and not the fun gloom like the board game that I played that one time.
You pulled one out. Yeah, man. I mean, like this. I mean, the reason we got on this is because of this idea that like the world is getting back to normal in kind of some of the worst ways, right? And this weekend, one of the biggest examples of that is definitely Ghostbusters coming out. And the idea being that, like, I've been avoiding it like the plague, not just because I don't want spoilers, because I just don't want to be part of that conversation anymore, right? And this is why a lot of this stuff is because it starts off talking about that, and then the next thing you know, you're 6 comments down on a Reddit thread, and somebody's talking about why this country's going to hell in a handbasket. And like, we're no better. Here we are falling into these same holes. But a lot of what we talk about, I hope we are smart enough to contextualize. Like, to your point about how some stuff's been really weird lately, like, I had a bathroom explode on Friday, and I've spent the last 2 days basically freaking out that I might not have a toilet. We almost had to stay at a hotel for the weekend. It got so bad that the city had to come and get involved and actually come and flag out where like all the different drainage pipes are in the area and the electrical wiring and all that before a plumbing company could come in and bring in a backhoe and dig up our entire lower front yard. Like, it was just nuts in this house for the last 2 days. Like, couldn't flush the toilet. Our downstairs toilet looked like it was basically Shrek Swamp. Like, it was just gross. Like, it's just been a nightmare over here. In the middle of all of that, still having internet outage issues, which I've talked about a few times on the show now. Like, Comcast Xfinity out here has just been jerking us around like crazy for the last few months, and I don't know what the issue is. They had a guy out here replacing something on a telephone pole earlier in the week, and we were joking that they were finally going to stop. And then lo and behold, like yesterday, I didn't have internet for 20 minutes, then did for an hour, then didn't for 20 minutes, then did for an hour, then didn't for 3 hours, then did for an hour. I didn't know if we were going to be able to record today. Like, it's been crazy, like the stuff that's going on, just like normal life stuff, because it feels like the world is just kind of getting back and nothing has changed. It feels like it did 3 years ago, and that's just bumming me out.
Yeah, it sucks that what getting back to normal is getting back to just like kind of a shitty existence. And also you talk about how you're trying to buy a house, right? Everything that you're going through, that's in a rental property, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
like there's that other, isn't there, like there's that other level that you kind of have to clear with the owner of the house before you do anything, right?
It's part of the it's part of the reason why some things have and have not been happening as fast as we like. And it's no no ill will to my landlord. It's one of the best landlords I've ever had in my life. But the owners of this house live in LA and I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. So they're not here. So we call them, hopefully get a hold of them. If not, we hear back from them generally within the hour. Then they have to start doing some research on how to solve the problem and who to call. Then they have to reach out to somebody, hope they get them on the phone or leave a message and hear back with them in an hour. Then that person has to decide how they're actually going to go about it, give them a quote, and then my landlord then has to decide if they're going to go with that quote or find somebody else and start the whole process over again. And like it's not fun, and we were kind of like on the we were of two minds about it. Like the bathroom blows up and I'm looking at a toilet that I'm just like, I don't think I could ever use this toilet ever again. Like, I think we might have to take it outside and just like light it a fire once all this is over, guys. And I'm thinking to myself, if we owned the house ourselves, there's a lot of things that I could be doing right now to speed this process up. Meanwhile, my roommate is like, thank God we don't own this house because this is not our problem at the end of the day. Yes, we don't get to go to the bathroom for 24 hours in our own house, but that's nothing compared to the fact that we don't have to now drop $5,000-$6,000 to get this problem fixed and like deal with like different plumbers in the area and figure out who to call and what to do. Like there is something to the idea that being in a rental, I can just call one person, say this is a problem I'm having, fix it, and then it's on them to figure it out. And like that is a pretty sweet deal. And it was hard for me to argue when they said that. I was like, yeah, you're not wrong. On the one hand, I would love to be fixing this myself right now. On the other hand, I'm glad I'm not fixing this myself right now. I guess we don't know. Like we don't know if this was supposed to be a sign that we should move our ass in finding a new house, or maybe we should just cool it.
Yeah, that's the eternal argument, right? The eternal argument between renting and owning is that once you own a house, you realize all of those little expenses you didn't have to handle because you were renting the place you were living, right? Yeah. It's and then it's a whole other burden, but along with that does come equity. And I'd like you to point me in the direction of whoever told you should have bought a house 5 years ago, because I'd like to slap them across the face. Because the other thing, right, is everybody is saying, "Oh man, you could sell your home right now and you'd sell at a profit, right?" But then I wouldn't have anywhere to live because every other house that's out there is the same cost as the home that I would be selling right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't exist in a vacuum. My home is not the only one that peaked in value right now. Every home is peaked in value. So if I sell my house, sure, I have all that money, but I don't have anywhere to live. And shelter is the necessity. Regardless of what the country wants to point at in terms of money is what we should be looking for, shelter is infinitely more important than that.
Yeah, man. That is a loaded statement out here in Salt Lake City, Utah. I will be honest. I'm just with an ongoing homeless boom right now that I don't even really want to approach on this show. But the idea that like you're not wrong. I mean, like that at the end of the day, the more important thing is just to have a roof over our heads, and so it's why we're not diving head first and jumping at the first thing that we find, because we don't have to, and we're really lucky in that sense. We're not in a position where we're like getting kicked out of the house right now. It's not like we're in a rush to find a place. God knows, maybe after the holidays and the amount of money our landlord just spent, they might turn around and say, hey, we're gonna rent out to someone else or sell the house or something to that effect. Like there's a bunch of things that they could say to us. So like that is a possibility, and definitely one that's on our mind while we're doing this. But there are people in much more dire situations than that are trying to find places to live and places to go. Some of them are the ones selling their houses right now, that we are going into these houses and they're trying to upsell these things to us, where they're like, oh yeah, there's an entirely finished basement, and then you go down into the basement and it's a 4-foot ceiling, and you're like, yep, really nice carpeting, really nice painting, really nice molding. I just can't stand up straight.
Like I really like being like Big Boy Caprici at the end of Dick Tracy in my finished basement.
Yeah. Yeah, so like there are definitely people out there that are in much worse situations than us, and we know that. So we're trying to make sure that like we're doing all of the right things as we do this, right? And it's not easy to do because, like I said, there are some people out there that are just like they're trying to take advantage of you. They're trying to make your job harder. They're trying to make sure that it's not easy for anyone. Like I am, without getting into too many like gross details about my own personal life, I'm not the breadwinner in my household, right? Like I am very lucky to be supported by some people in my family that make a lot of more money than I do doing some things. They also just happen to be women. And so them walking into certain areas of this conversation, like there's definitely moments where they can get taken advantage of. I mean, talk to any woman out there about going to buy a car, and like I'm not saying every car dealership out there is going to treat them this way, but they're going to have that moment where they get treated a very particular way at a car dealership, and it is the grossest story you'll ever hear. Like that, like this sort of stuff that is unfortunately par for the course. That doesn't include some of the weirder stuff we run into, like people out there trying to sell us a 4-bed apartment or home, and when we walk into it, it's one bedroom and then another room that they've like put up a paper wall in to separate into two rooms.
Jesus.
Yeah, man. It's a jungle out there, right? Like everybody is just kind of like I said, like everybody's trying to force the world back into some shape that they recognized from before, but like it's not going to work.
The discussion should be that shape wasn't the proper shape.
Well, I mean, right? Like, yeah.
We were given the unique opportunity to change the shape of things. I hate myself. Mostly I hate whatever that guy's name is.
Neil LaBute.
Fuck you, Neil LaBute. we haven't had a good fuck you, Neil LaBute on the Say Report for a while, but yeah, fuck you, Neil LaBute. But yeah, we should have tried to modify things. We should have treated the world like Adam and then been Rachel Weisz and changed it. But you know what? Big kudos to Rachel Weisz for shaping Adam into what would eventually become People's Sexiest Man of the Year. Did that work? Did that all track? My 1999
I
Paul
just love
Rudd.
that, and I'm probably killing the streak here by doing this, but I do love how much we have just been dancing around Ghostbusters Afterlife and just not talking about it this entire episode. Like, and that's really where a lot of this comes from. It's not the movie itself, but the oeuvre of everything around that movie is just kind of my whole problem with like the internet and the world like this past year or so is just the ways in which like the community around that particular film and the way that it has acted and then mysteriously disappeared in the past week, because now that like people are starting to see it, you notice how quiet a lot of people have suddenly gotten about how it was going to be the true sequel we all wanted. And it's astounding to me the ways in which a movie that didn't even exist yet had such a rabid fan base that was treating people like crap on the internet for literally at this point 5 years. And now here we are, and it's finally here, and now they've gone stone quiet. And I feel like it is just such a great example of just all of my issues right now with the world is you just hear a lot of talk from people, but the second that rubber hits the road, it's just disappointing silence and nothing being changed.
Wow. That I applaud you for what you've just done and the way that you've brought everything together. And now that we're talking about movies, and maybe we can get a little bit more positive, inject some positivity into this last segment of the Say Report, a movie came out on HBO Max this week. Do you know the name of that movie?
King Richard?
It's King Richard. Did you know that it's not about Shakespeare or anything like that, but no, actually the father of Serena and Venus Williams?
Yeah, man. I have been tentatively looking forward to this movie. I have some personal kind of like issues about the squishiness of telling the story of two of the most powerful female figures in our lifetime told through the eyes of their male father. But I think I might have even mentioned this once before when the preview came out. It has definitely been brought to my attention, and I can definitely see the benefit of the idea that it is also just showing a good like African American male father figure on screen in a important story that is signed off on by Venus and Serena Williams as producers of this film. So like it's definitely a discussion worth having, but one that we should recognize has probably been had by people in more important positions than me at this point.
Yeah. It is definitely something that you think of in terms of that. I guess where I felt a little squishy about the whole thing is, even if a person were to live their life the exact way that Richard Williams had Venus and Serena live their lives, that does not equal success. And that's the fictional, like, movie of it all, is that you still need to realize that while this is based on a true story, something somewhere went so right where it could have gone so wrong. And that, it's just, it was hard for me to watch the movie and be like, look at them and look at what their grit and hard work and determination did. But also, like, the guy that he, like, sort of forced to coach him by, you know, ambushing him at the country club and being like, you need to watch my girls play, like, that could have gone so differently, and we wouldn't even know who these two people are.
For sure. But the idea being that, like luck is definitely always part of the success formula, but luck can only be there if you're putting in the work for luck to be present.
Right.
Right.
And it was just, that was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with in this whole film, was like, it's great that it worked out for him, but there are people who do all the same work as them and it doesn't work out. Work does not necessarily equal success. Working,
but that's not a fun movie to watch.
No, it's not a fun movie to watch, but it was, I think it's just the way that it's put together. And I mean, by all accounts, Richard Williams, he doesn't have the greatest persona in media, right? Like, he's always been presented as kind of hard and kind of an asshole and kind of marching to the beat of his own drummer. So it was really nice to see that, like, in the movie world, him represented as this loving father and everything about it. But also, I feel like Will Smith probably hoping for that Oscar with this film, and I don't think it's going to get it. He might get a nomination, but I don't know if it's, like, award worthy.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely one of those ones that feels like it's trying to, what's the word there, that Oscar bait, right? Like, it definitely feels very Oscar baity in the time of the year that it comes out, the type of movie that it is, all of that sort of stuff. That's just par for the course. Again, like, I don't know, it's weird because that is part of the Hollywood machine that I think you're kind of pointing to, and like, yeah, I mean, it's not the most egregious thing that the machine gets wrong, let me put it that way.
True, that's very true. I don't know, I mean, it's definitely worth watching. I'm not upset that I watched it. I learned some things, but it really was, the thing that was hard for me to get is that, like, we're watching a story knowing that these girls eventually grow up to be Venus and Serena Williams, two of the strongest, like, most successful females who currently are alive.
Athletes period.
Yeah.
Like, some of the greatest athletes period.
Oh, I mean,
and like, the idea being that why are we just not watching their story is the thing that kind of, and I haven't seen it yet, so like, I'm also speaking from just what I know about, like, from previews and stuff like that. So it was just always one of those things that was the first question I asked. But like I said, like, I've had this discussion with people and they have rightly pointed out to me the idea that, like, there's a lot more going on here than just that. So like it definitely is one that I was looking forward to. The other reason I was being very tentative about it is the Oscar baity nature of it, is that what that can do is, while it's not necessarily a sin, to point to another YouTube meme, but it's not necessarily like a sin for a film to be trying for an Oscar. It's just that if their focus is so hardcore on that award and not on, the project, it becomes very obvious that nobody's there for the actual, like, story or the actual movie. And so that's true of any movie that looks Oscar baity to me. So it's not even this particular movie look like it might have that problem. It's just, you always want to be wary of that, is if it's so focused on, like, making sure this one part of the movie gets highlighted so that it can win that award, it usually means that other parts are kind of in the dark.
Yeah. I don't know. So I mean, I'll hold off on any deeper discussion or further discussion about it until you get a chance to see it, because I don't want to influence any further than that. But it's an interesting movie, and I'm glad I watched it, and there'll probably be more discussion after you watch it, or maybe there won't. We'll see what happens. But if you have HBO Max and you're not watching the ones that are released in theater and HBO Max at the same time, you're leaving money on the table. There's literally no other reason to have HBO Max in 2021 than for that.
And I will say that it's the right time of year for a good sports bio. Like,
Oh,
I mean, like that Thanksgiving, everybody's going to hang out. It'll be a good one for like my mom and dad to definitely put on when they're sitting at my grandfather's house this weekend. You know, it's just the right time of year for that good type of movie.
Right. And there you go. And then also, if you have HBO Max, if you get it for King Richard, you'll get 8-Bit Christmas come Wednesday, which I'm excited to watch that and talk about it.
I'm super excited. I mean, for a number of different reasons, not least of which the unabashed like stealing of concepts from Christmas Story, like which in any other genre, I've talked about this before, I would probably give it hell for, but because it's a Christmas movie, that's A+ for me.
The worst thing, and this was not a shower thought, this was a commute thought, is it the time right to do a movie that is sort of the Christmas Story for the 80s? And the answer is yes. It is, because the first movie takes place, people sort of argue that it's like supposed to be 1939, possibly the Christmas of 1940 in Christmas Story. So that movie comes out in 1983. So then if like it's everybody wants a Nintendo, well that's 1985. And 1985 to now, that's 36 years. It's about the same thing, right?
Yep.
So that was fun. That was a fun realization that I'm far enough removed from my childhood for there to be a movie being nostalgic about my childhood being released.
And
now,
it's a little bit of a
great?
kick in the pants, but it's okay because Neil Patrick Harris is going to take us along for that journey. And if anyone was going to, Doogie Howser himself would definitely be the right one.
Right. I'm surprised that he's not going to be typing at a blue screen computer the whole movie. There you go. That made me feel good. I mean, Doogie Howser, I always reference that my favorite thing is when he tells the kid that getting a shot and an inoculation is sort of like the silver arrows in Zelda. Because it just feels so weird. Because he's like talking to a 4-year-old and the kid's like, oh yeah, you guys saved the princess. It's like, this kid has never been to Ganon, has he? Is this kid the wizard? I don't know what to do, Doogie Howser. I'm sorry. It's something that's lived with me since I saw that scene back in 2006 when it first came back to streaming, and I'm like, this is nuts. Why is this happening? Also, have you caught Red Notice yet? Did you watch Red Notice yet on Netflix?
Yeah,
excellent. We can dig into some fucking Red Notice. The Better Jungle Cruise. Can I be a total jerk and say that? I don't.
It's not even the same thing. It's just not even the same. It is a series of fight scenes with a thin plot to allow for Dwayne Johnson to show that he could be quippy too, and then for Ryan Reynolds to just do his thing, and then also Gal Gadot gets to just kind of show that she could do something other than the Wonder Woman thing, because I think she was supposed to get that chance with Kenneth Branagh and not Murder on the Orient Express, but the sequel to it. What was it going to be? Death on the Nile, right? Yeah. I feel like that was supposed to be her whole breakaway from Diana, and then like that got shelved because of COVID, which is a shame. And I'm excited to see it if and when it finally does come out. But like since that didn't work, I'm hoping maybe this is a good stepping stone to get away from that. Also, not the first time she's worked with Dwayne Johnson, right? Isn't she in the
she's in Fast Five at least. Yeah. I think she's introduced in she's introduced in Fast Five as Giselle. And she's awesome in that. And that was my fun, was like, oh, it's nice to see them back together. And then everybody kind of looked at me and I'm like, we need to watch Fast and Furious movies. It needs to happen. I know you've all seen the first one and the second one. And then you were like, we don't need to do any more. You need to do more, guys.
Yeah, they've just become a completely different movies after that. I mean, literally, like completely different movie.
Yeah, once Fast 5 came along and realized that like this is a franchise with some sticking power, I'll even give credit to Fast and Furious. hilarious. Because, like, Tokyo Drift, when there was nobody from the first two movies in it, and it really kind of felt like, what's the point of this movie? And then I skipped it until Fast and Furious came out, and I'm like, oh man, I really do love these characters, and it made me go back and watch Tokyo Drift, and then Tokyo Drift may be the best one in the series. I'll stand by it, and I love me some Fast 5, but Tokyo Drift is the Karate Kid if Daniel-san had to learn how to drift race in Japan.
So it's like the next Karate Kid.
Yes, if Hilary Swank were Lucas Black. And that kind of works out. They have similar facial structures. It's in their DNA. I hate myself for what I just did. But so the thing about Red Notice is that Dwayne Johnson is also 400 years old, though, Sejohn. You're burying the lead. You're burying the lead. And is this supposed to be a spoiler? Yes, but Dwayne Johnson is 400 years old in both Jungle Cruise and Red Notice. He's not. I'm being a jerk. But there are some big twists and turns in Red Notice that, again, I feel like you would question if I actually read them, but I did. Because it was a little more in the margins for this one than Jungle Cruise.
More in the margins than the bullshit you were pulling out of your ass for that. I doubt it. But the idea, like for me, Red Notice is the kind of movie like it's in the same vein as like a Taken and where, or John Wick is another good example where like there is a hierarchy to different things in film, right? Like the idea of the six, what are they called? Spectacle, story, character, blah, 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 right?
Six movements, yes.
Yeah. And the idea being that like, these are the kinds of movies where spectacle is just top, right? Like they just put that at the top. They don't care much about anything else. And so those movies can be fun or they can be a bummer. This movie, Red Notice, is so much fun, and like there's just moments of it where you're just like, it's this is what we mean when we say this movie is better than it kind of needs to be in a lot of places. It's not that I think that it is mind-blowingly good. It's just that when I come in the first couple of the first 20 minutes is a parkour chase with Ryan Reynolds through a museum, and I'm supposed to really believe that was him that dove through those things, and I'm supposed to really believe that Dwayne Johnson rode that ladder. No, of course not. But like that's just fun to watch, and then all of a sudden, like an hour into it, I'm just getting like deep into some lore on these characters, and I'm just like, I'm in, I buy it, I'm sold, and so that's why I point to like a Taken or a John Wick, is because for every Taken, Liam Neeson does 6 other movies like that we don't talk about, right? Like Unknown or whatever nonsense those other movies are that he
the one between the graves, the ice trucking one, where
exactly. But there's a reason why we hold Taken up as the one, right? Yeah. And the same goes for any real action star out there, is they're going to do 5 or 6 movies, and then there's going to be that one that comes along that really like kicks it, and we all fall in love with them, right? And this feels like it's that movie. Like I cannot wait for the inevitable franchise of this film.
The crazy thing about Red Notice is that it's a reconnecting between Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I like saying it, but Dwayne Johnson. Like, I'll officially retire the Rock part of it, unless it's hilarious, unless I can make it work funny on the show. Yeah, Dwayne Johnson, you've officially earned it. Way to go, Rock. But
Rock.
Save some of that for the sequel. It's a reconnecting between the director of Skyscraper and Dwayne Johnson, and people are losing their minds over that. And I'm like, who saw Skyscraper? Nobody saw Skyscraper. And now what's that?
Kevin did. I think we talked about it on this show.
Who did?
Did you not see Skyscraper?
No, I didn't see Skyscraper. I wanted to, but I didn't get a chance to.
Oh, where it's him fighting the building?
He's fighting a building. Yeah, it's Dwayne Johnson versus a building. Yeah, I wanted to see it. And he only has one leg, so that he can try to get a leg up in one scene that they showed off in the trailer like 8 or 9 times. But the success of Red Notice, and by all accounts it's a success, right? On Disney Plus Day, it was streamed more than Shang-Chi and Jungle Cruise combined.
Huh.
Like that was the number I read, where I'm like, well, now I gotta watch Red Notice. I was gonna watch it eventually, but it just leapt to the top of my queue.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, and like the success of Red Notice is making people go back to watch Skyscraper, and I think that might be my favorite thing about it. Is that like, well, if Red Notice is like, we gotta watch the one where Dwayne Johnson fights a building.
Yeah. The only real bummer for me, and I love Ryan Reynolds, but I don't think that this is like a definitive role for him. Like, like, I mean, Deadpool is like the obvious example, right? So the entire time I'm sitting there struggling with my love for Ryan Reynolds, definitely enjoying him in this movie, and just wishing it was Sean William Scott the entire time.
Yeah, I get that. I can understand why you would feel that way. Is Ryan Reynolds the new Sean William Scott, much like Dwayne Johnson is the new Brendan Fraser?
I mean, hey, if they can work that out where they do like 3 or 4 different movies together that are not sequels but are considered spiritual sequels to one another, like I'm down for that. I'm down for that relationship. From all accounts, they got along really well on this. I mean, all of the marketing really wants you to believe that the 3 of them, the 2 of them, and Gal Gadot are all besties now. That could go one way or the other with Dwayne Johnson, because from what I understand, I still can't tell you if his quote unquote feud with Vin Diesel is real or not, or just for the marketing, just for the memes,
Yeah, I don't, and honestly, I don't want to know. I'm just happy thinking that they don't get along, because it makes Fast 5 a better movie, and then it makes Fast and Furious 6 a better movie, and then by the time you get to Furious 7, I'm like, I hope these guys hate each other, because look at what that hatred has built for us.
See, and I firmly believe the rumors that there is a score system between Vin Diesel and Dwayne Johnson, and then I think eventually, what's his name, transporter there, Jason Statham. I think Jason Statham. It might have been John Cena. Apparently got in on this on the scoreboard system, but apparently, like, in order to make sure that at no point is either one of them quote unquote winning in the movies, there's a literal point system to the fight scenes, so that the choreographers can make sure that they're being awarded even points throughout the entire movies, and that to me could still go either way. That could just be 2 friends that are just having this bullshit like fun off screen, or it could be that they are that petty with each other. So like I can't. So I believe that part of the rumor to be true. What I don't believe to be true is that they necessarily despise working with each other, whatever bullshit Twitter wants you to believe, because like there's just like what was the last a couple of weeks ago, Vin Diesel apparently tweeted something at Dwayne Johnson just before Red Notice came out, like saying like, hey, like we really gotta work this one out, bud, because we really want you to be there, your family, that whole thing, like, and that could just be, as far as I know, that could just be just marketing for the next Fast and Furious movie. I didn't know that Dwayne Johnson was like, I hate working with him so much, I'm going to leave the most successful action franchise in history right now.
No, it really kind of feels like, let's keep Fast and Furious in the discussion with Dwayne Johnson.
Yeah.
Because you don't go into a spin-off movie where your Hobbs and Shaw doesn't happen if Dwayne Johnson isn't going to still be tangentially connected to the Fast and Furious franchise. Unless, and this doesn't happen in Hobbs and Shaw, Hobbs is killed in Hobbs and Shaw. Like, he survives that movie. So, like, there's room for more Hobbs in the Fast and Furious universe. I don't know. It blows my mind that I still haven't watched F9. Right? Is that the name of the new one?
F9.
F9?
Yeah.
It's F9, I guess.
And Furious. I don't know.
Whatever. As long as Fast 10 is Fast 10 your seatbelts, I will be there for it. I've been saying that since the earliest days of the Slay Report. Fast 10 your seatbelts. But yeah, it's Red Notice was a lot of fun, and really, it also, Ryan Reynolds showing up in Hobbs and Shaw, it worked. It worked on every level it had to work on. So thank you for that. Not you. Thank you to the movie. You're just here to accept it on its behalf.
Yeah, and I don't want to walk away too far before I really do say that Gal Gadot in this movie is also like just as big of a blast to watch. Like she proves that she can still hold her own in a franchise film in a way that I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just misreading the room, but I think a lot of people were like really starting to question her star power after something like Wonder Woman 84 flops, and it did flop. Like there's no denying that. I hope that a movie like this can show people that like sometimes bad movies get made. There's no reason why like to to say that she can't put the work in. She's proven time and time again she can. You know, like even as Wonder Woman, I think she's had some phenomenal moments in Justice League and in Batman v Superman and all that sort of stuff. Plus, the original Wonder Woman is still probably my favorite DC proper movie. I don't know what the hell we'll call it now that they're killing the universe, but
yeah, I mean, Wonder Woman 84, even as bad as it is, that whole opening in the mall she's on fire during that sequence.
Mm-hmm.
And if it hadn't followed another opening sequence that then doesn't really play at all to the movie you're about to watch, I think that we'd have... I mean, Wonder Woman 84 is an interesting one. And my first thoughts after Red Notice was, all right, so the world hopefully can forgive Gal Gadot's part in Wonder Woman 1984, right? Like, we can understand that she did the best she could with everything. And that's just my hope, right? Meanwhile, my father's like, Red Notice was like a Wonder Woman 1984 to me. And I'm like, you're just being mean. You're just being mean because you fell asleep. You didn't watch the movie. But there are those people who say that, right? I guess my father, being who he is, proves that some people are never going to be able to move away from it. And that's sad, right? Because that should not be her defining movie at all. It should be no one's defining movie. We should just forget about Wonder Woman 1984. And luckily, based on the end of that movie, everybody does. Sorry.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but Red Notice, check it out. And also, it made me want more Blood and Treasure. Is Blood and Treasure ever coming back? There's a question. I'm just going to cast that one out into the world.
Yeah, I
hope
I
that,
you were asking, like, I had an answer for
no, you don't work on Blood and Treasure, but it's starting Red Notice, I'm like, oh, so it's just Blood and Treasure. Because, I guess, spoilers for the first season of Blood and Treasure, they're searching for Cleopatra's sarcophagus. That's the MacGuffin of the first season of Blood and Treasure. So when they're like, and there was Cleopatra, and I'm just like, oh, so it's going to be Blood and Treasure. And then it proceeded to mostly be Blood and Treasure, but with A-list celebrities instead of, like, TV-level celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it wasn't as funny as Blood and Treasure, but Blood and Treasure got 10 episodes to tell a story that they had 2 hours to tell.
Yeah.
So they're allowed to, like, have some more levity and, you know, not have to shy away from brevity because they need to get to the next set piece in a film like Red Notice. But yeah, it was
also,
good.
Just some of the set piece stuff is just because you mentioned it is also just super fun. I mean, like the whole opening chase scene through the museum, like I referenced it, but it is actually a blast. And very specifically, the moment in which Dwayne Johnson gets into a car and like fucking Beastie Boys, I think is what kicks
Sabotage
in, and you're like,
up.
yeah, and you're just like, yeah, and then he gets hit by another car, and that's it, scene over, and you're just like, oh, okay, like, so it also is very willing to do the whole, like, we know what you're here for, and we're going to subvert that a little bit. Not so much that you don't stick around for it, but we are going to subvert it a little bit.
It's self-aware. It's hyper self-aware. In the best way. Not Julia Roberts playing Julia Roberts in Ocean's 12. Or Julia Roberts playing Tess pretending to be Julia Roberts in Ocean's 12. No. Much better self-awareness of the genre and what is being done and on display. So I don't know anything else that I want to add. I am glad that we kind of lifted this one at the end because we sank into the doldrums a little bit there in the middle. Anything else that you'd like to talk about?
No, man. Like I said, a lot of my plans for the weekend in terms of like movie watching and all that sort of stuff get kind of flipped on its head when I walked into my bathroom midday on Friday and realized that I was about to throw up. So... no, yeah, my week got a little fucked there, but hey, Thanksgiving this week, so we'll see. Right. You know, want to remind everybody we got a special episode coming out this week.
Yeah, and it's a big special episode. It's a crossover with our other endeavor, the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. We decided to cross over with ourselves, which I can't even begin to tell you the quantum mechanics that are on display in order to do something like that. It's
well, we do a lot of quantum traveling on it. on that show, to be fair. So
yeah. But check it out. We also have Will there too. So if you've been wondering where Will's been in terms of episodes, that's what he's doing. He shows up again. So that's dropping on Thanksgiving. It's a Thanksgiving special crossover between the Say Report and the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. So check it out. It'd be very nice if you did that. I think that it'll be a good way to help celebrate the day. And then there was something. Hit Monkey. Watch Hit Monkey. I watched the first episode. Really scratched the itch left over from every anime I watched, just ending like mid-story.
Nice. Yeah. And I know that you were not a huge fan of MODOK, right?
I haven't got a chance to watch MODOK. That's the thing. I'm very interested in MODOK, but it's one of those situations where with Hit Monkey, I sat everybody down and said, we're going to watch the first episode of Hit Monkey, and I'm going to see who else is on board. Because if nobody is on board, I'm watching Hit Monkey. This is a character I actually care about.
The testing grounds for non-MCU Marvel, like Disney basically allowing Hulu to be the place where they can put anything that's Marvel related that doesn't quite fit into the larger picture, is I think a really smart way to go about it. So like MODOK was for me, it was a blast, but it does get very robot chickeny in a lot of places, not just because of the style, but also because of the humor and a lot of the people working on it, and stuff like that. I don't mind that. Like that works for Sejohn.
I'm a person who one of my favorite storylines involving MODOK is when he becomes Brodock, the like super sexy California surfer version of himself.
Nice.
And then
you'll definitely get some fun out of MODOK. So I've been really looking forward to Hit Monkey because of it not being part of the MCU, not being part of all of the Disney stuff, like them very distinctly choosing to put it on Hulu instead and things like that. I'm super excited just because of just the oeuvre of it. Never mind the actual show itself looking fucking amazing.
That first episode, everything you need if you don't know who Hit Monkey is. And it checks off everything that I wanted in an introduction to Hit Monkey. So nice. Like real enjoyable stuff. So check that out. But the big thing, we're going to self-promote. Check out our crossover episode with the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe dropping this Thursday. I did real interviews for it in order to make sure things worked. They're not featured in it, but I did some things that I'm proud of.
Oh yeah, no, we talk about it on the episode, but we put a lot more groundwork and legwork, is the real term I'm looking for, into those shows. Not because we don't love you guys and love this show. It's just not what this show has ever been about for us. But you will see, if you've not listened to the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe, it's a very good introduction to it, because you'll see the actual amount of like work and concept we put into that versus this nonsense.
Oh, I don't call it nonsense. It's just by the nature of talking about everything, you're going to stumble into some things that you're like, oh boy, the education system again. But hey, that's the joy of podcasting. So if you would like to get in touch with us, if you'd like to tell me about your educational experiences, I am on Twitter at Devon D. Decker.
And if you want to hit me up and talk about what I maybe missed this weekend on the streaming services because I was too busy digging out my bathroom downstairs, you can hit me up at Siege vs. the World.
All right, excellent. And Will, until we get to hear your beautiful voice on Thursday, why don't you take us home one more time?
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Stephen Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.